Hi everybody, and welcome back to Philosophy of the Paranormal with me, Dr. Josh Redstone. Well, as you can see, I'm back in my usual spot. I'm still trying to get caught up, however. This is week 4's lecture, the second lecture from week 4, which was actually supposed to be done last week, so I am still behind, owing to my juggling of many teaching responsibilities, and for that I'd like to apologize to all of you. However, I think this will be a fun lecture. I hope that I saved you all some racking your brains over reading from the previous lecture, and I hope that this one is interesting to you as well. Although a little more reading was involved, it certainly is going to be an interesting topic. Today's topic is, of course, dreams and out-of-body experiences, and I thought it would be really cool to talk about dreams in a class on the philosophy of the paranormal, because dreams are one of those interesting phenomena that were for a long time thought to be very, very mysterious, and also divine or supernatural in origin, as we'll see here. But of course now we can study dreams and the dreaming mind and the dreaming brain with the tools of the cognitive sciences. So we're finally beginning to understand the dreaming brain. We have been starting to understand it, I would argue, probably since the 1950s, when we first started doing studies using electroencephalography, that is recording changes in electrical potential at the scalp. And we can understand differences between stages of sleep in terms of brain activity and so on and so forth there, which is very fascinating. We started doing that in the 1950s. Some of the reasons we might want to talk about dreams or study dreams, besides the reason why we're looking at them in this class today, their association with paranormal phenomena, those reasons include perhaps identifying what we call in the cognitive sciences the neural correlates of consciousness. I'm not going to talk about this in great detail today, but it's a term I thought you should all be aware of, because consciousness and this idea of the power of consciousness has come up from time to time in this class. Now, those who say that consciousness can affect the world, whether we're talking about micro-PK, as we were in the PK and ESP lecture, or in the same lecture I also talked about this law of attraction idea that you find in New Age circles, quantum mysticism, and kind of like different kinds of hooey like that stuff. We find this idea of the power of consciousness, right? Well, people that take that view seem to be taking a dualist, non-materialist view of consciousness, where consciousness is perhaps a different substance or is a force of its own that can act upon the physical universe. The other side, on the side where I'm situated, the substance monist, physicalist, kind of naturalistic view of the mind, consciousness is just what the brain does, or one of the things that the brain does. And one of the things we try to do here is identify neural correlates of consciousness, so physical processes in the brain that are correlated with certain features of consciousness and may possibly be causing those states of consciousness too. We're not sure yet, but we can't tell if there's a causal relationship until we identify a correlational relationship, right? So we need to find the correlation first, but not all correlations are causal, so that's important. So by looking at how dreams are realized in the brain, because as we'll see today, dreams use the same neural machinery that waking perception uses. It's just that it happens offline. It's not connected to the world via sense input and output, or sense input and motor output. But the mental representations we have in dreams are run, we'll say run in the brain using the same mechanisms that waking mental representations of waking perception are, which is very interesting. So by studying dreaming, we might identify neural correlates of consciousness. And I'll come back to this idea in the lecture. By discussing the differences between dreaming and waking, we might also get a little clearer with our terminology in the process of doing that. Our terminology with respect to what counts as a conscious experience and what doesn't, which again, we'll touch on this as we go. Of course, we're not going to get to the bottom of any of these questions today. This is one of those things where, well, like many of the single topics we've talked about so far, you could probably really spend 2 or 3 lectures, or maybe even an entire class on, an entire course that is, on talking about some of these ideas. So we're not going to get to the bottom of all of this today by any stretch of the imagination, but I wanted you to be aware of this kind of recurring theme of consciousness and the power of consciousness and the neural correlates of consciousness, because consciousness has come up here and there throughout this course. This is also the main reason why I want to talk about dreams, particularly lucid dreams and out-of-body experiences, are because they are really interesting examples of paranormal phenomena that are now well understood and no longer considered paranormal. So where this has not happened with ESP and PK, this has happened with, say, lucid dreams, where they've gone from being dismissed by scientists to being taken seriously, and now we have some very good evidence for their existence. This hasn't happened for a lot of other things in paranormal studies and parapsychology. So this is kind of, on the one hand, a way for us to learn a bit about the mind, and on the other, a way for us to understand a success in parapsychology, which ironically, this success story, dreams, lucid dreams, out-of-body experiences, are now primarily studied by psychophysiologists and anomalistic psychologists, not parapsychologists. So it's weird. As soon as it works, as soon as parapsychology found something real, the thing that it found no longer was parapsychological. Interesting. Anyway, let's talk about dreams now. Now, before I get right into it, I should mention that, of course, I'm drawing from chapter 23 from Susan Blackmore's book, Consciousness and Introduction. I'm also drawing from a short article by Lynn Leviton and Stephen Laberge. Both of these are available on See You Learn. Now, I'm drawing from these sources, but I'm not following them in quite the same way as I followed Blackmore's previous chapters that we've covered in this class. So it's not like I'm going to be walking you through the chapter one bit at a time, but I'm going to draw selectively here and there, and I'm going to add my own ideas in as we go. So before we really get into it, we should probably try to answer the question, what are dreams? We can get some idea, not just from our own experience, but from a quick Google search, right? Google Dictionary, in fact, defines a dream as a series of thoughts, images, and sensations occurring in a person's mind during sleep. Wikipedia similarly defines a dream as a succession of images, ideas, emotions, and sensations that usually occur involuntarily in the mind during certain stages of sleep. And most technical definitions agree with these quick internet search type definitions, right? Dreams are experiences, ostensive experiences that we seem to have in the night when we are in REM sleep primarily, or rapid eye movement sleep. This is the stage of sleep, and there are different stages of sleep where dreams are reported most frequently. At least the kinds of dreams that we tend to remember. We can dream in non-REM sleep, but it tends to be thought-like, whereas dreams in REM sleep tend to come with, imagery, sound, interacting with other characters, almost like a narrative or a plot, this kind of thing, right? So rapid eye movement sleep is characterized by rapid eye movements. Most of the muscles in the body are actually paralyzed, and this is because signals coming from the brain that communicate with our muscles to tell us to move are blocked at the brain stem when we are in REM sleep. The brain stem, of course, is at the base of the brain down here, including like the cerebellum and all the really old, evolutionarily old bits of the brain where the brain meets the spinal column or the spinal cord. So we have a paralysis in the body except for the heart, lungs, and the eyes. If we breathe faster in a dream, our respiration rate will actually increase as we sleep, right? And if we're looking around at the dream scenery, those are the eye movements that we seem to be making, actually, when we're in REM sleep. But everything else is paralyzed so that when we don't act out our dreams. You know, I may have a dream that I can step off my balcony out here and simply land safely, or perhaps fly away. But if I were to try to do that in a dream, and I actually, in real life, happen to sleepwalk off of my balcony or something, well, I could be seriously injured or dead. For that reason, dreaming brains, you know, generate muscle activity, but it's only ever seen as twitches because the activity is inhibited at the brainstem. So, and the interesting thing here is when we first started looking into the goings-on in the dreaming brain in the 1950s, we quickly learned that in REM sleep, when we observe with an EEG and an electroencephalogram, we can see that the dreaming brain is about as active as when we're awake, which is very interesting. In fact, the activity we see in the brain varies between certain stages of sleep. This is talked about in the Blackmore chapter in some detail. I'm not going to go into it in super detail here, but there's a good figure in that book that shows the stages of sleep and what kind of brain waves you'd see on an EEG, what kind of eye movement patterns you'd see on an EOG, so on and so forth. I'll put a simpler diagram up here, a simpler kind of mapping of the stages of sleep. But basically what happens is we go from waking into maybe a very brief REM cycle down into stage 1 sleep, and we go deeper through stage 1, 2, 3, down to stage 4, which is a deep sleep, sometimes called slow wave sleep, because we see long, slow waves on our electroencephalograms. In this sleep, this deep non-REM sleep, we don't really dream very much, and when we do, they're not vivid like dreams that occur in REM sleep. They tend to be thought-like. If we wake people up, for example, when they're in non-REM sleep and ask them what they were just thinking about, they will say, you know, maybe I was just thinking about this person or thinking about doing this. But if we wake someone up from REM sleep, they will report having had a dream, oftentimes, a vivid dream where they were in a different place doing something rather than merely thinking about these things. Of course, dreams in non-REM sleep are very difficult to recall. Dreams in REM sleep are very difficult to recall if we don't awaken directly from them, actually. So it's difficult to study dreams for this reason, because so many dreams just aren't remembered, and even when they are remembered, just because of you know, how memory works when we recall things, there are worries about reliability in the reports of what we recall. But for our purposes in this class, that's not really a huge concern. In any case, so people go through several stages of sleep per night. So we'll go through our first cycle where we go down into deep sleep, and then finally at the end of the cycle we come back up into REM sleep and perhaps have a brief dream for a few minutes. And we go back and forth throughout the night from deep sleep into REM sleep for 4 or 5 cycles through the entire night. And the REM cycles actually get longer as the night goes on. So when you're first falling asleep, your first dream may be a minute or so and you might not remember it. But if you're sleeping in, at least, your dreams in your 5th cycle before you wake up will be much longer. You have more of a chance of awakening directly from a REM cycle and of remembering your dreams. Sometimes when you're falling asleep, you also see what's called hypnagogic imagery. So hypnagogic imagery is, you know, those strange patterns you may have noticed sometimes, as weird lights and floaters and geometric patterns that appear before your eyes as you're falling asleep. That's called hypnagogic imagery. And this can sometimes lead you into a brief dream when you're falling asleep. Sometimes you'll be awakened here by something called a myoclonic jerk. This is when we're falling asleep and we like, sleeping, I'm awake, right? You have like a kind of shock and you wake up all of a sudden. I used to have dreams where if I was very, very tired and I was falling asleep in a vehicle, perhaps on a road trip, I'd start nodding off and I'd have a dream that, I remember a particular instance of this where I had a dream where I was running and I tripped, and then just before I hit the ground, I was awakened with a myoclonic jerk. And these myoclonic jerks are actually the brain's way of making sure you're not dying as you're falling asleep. Sometimes as we're falling asleep, the brain, as smart as our brains are, they're kind of dumb in some ways too. The brain thinks the body is dying and tries to wake it up with a myoclonic jerk. Sometimes this is incorporated into a dream, a short dream of perhaps running and falling and waking suddenly, if it's in one of your first dreams of the night. But dreams get longer as the night goes on. All right. Now, of course, humans aren't the only creatures that dream. Other mammals dream as well. Not all mammals dream, but others do dream. You've probably seen a pet dreaming. If you have a dog or a cat, you've probably seen them having a dream. But not all mammals dream. Reptiles, by the way, also don't dream. Dreaming seems to be limited to certain examples of mammals. Dolphins don't seem to dream. Interesting fact about dolphins that's mentioned in the Blackboard chapter is that only 1/2 of the dolphin's brain is asleep at any one time. That's really interesting. But they don't seem to have dreams like we do. If dolphins do dream, I imagine their dreams are much different than human dreams. But it doesn't seem like they dream like humans or dogs or cats do. Perhaps you have the sense that you don't dream very much, because perhaps you don't remember dreams ever. But everyone dreams. It's just that you're not remembering your dreams. Everybody dreams multiple times a night. Because remember, we enter REM sleep multiple times a night. We go through 4, 5, maybe 6 sleep cycles if we're really sleeping in. So we go through many stages of sleep where we dream multiple times a night. We just don't remember most of them. Probably because we don't awaken directly from a dream, and dreams are quickly forgotten if we don't awaken directly from them. So, most people just don't remember their dreams. But you do dream, definitely. If you didn't dream, we would also expect to see some kind of weird effects of that in real life, because although we don't quite understand what dreaming is for, it's thought that it does play some important role in a healthy brain and mind, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So, why are dreams so difficult to remember in the first place? Well, I'm not sure, but I do have one possible explanation to offer to you, and this is from psychophysiologist Stephen Laberge. I'm not strongly pushing this account. I'm just mentioning it as a possible explanation. I don't have any strong commitments to Laberge's account here, but in any case, imagine, if you will, a cat who lives next door to a particularly vicious dog. And the cat often dreams of this dog, and one day, perhaps the cat dreams that the dog has run away. So it wakes up, believing that the dog next door is gone. The cat ventures over and is unfortunately eaten by the dog. So, this is kind of a simplistic example, but it's meant to highlight this idea that remembering our dreams could be maladaptive because we might get details wrong about the world, especially with regard to certain threats. That's one answer, but the answer, I think, to the question, why is it difficult to remember our dreams, is going to depend on what dreams do, what dreams are for in terms of, function, evolutionarily speaking, perhaps. dreams... Now, I'm going to revisit this question of why we dream in the first place shortly, but for now, just know that what Laberge is proposing is that perhaps not remembering our dreams is maladaptive in the same way as acting out our dreams would be. It would expose us to dangers. We may risk, if we recall our dreams and our dreams are wrong about the world, we may be wrong about details that might be critical to our survival, so on and so forth. I'm not sure how convincing this is, because the dreams we do recall, granted, Laberge is right, most dreams go unrecalled, but the dreams that we do recall are often so strange and bizarre that even though during the dream we were mistaken about the fact that we were dreaming, you know, we have these strange, bizarre dreams and we think, oh yeah, that's normal, you know, whatever it is we're seeing, maybe some kind of flying elephants or some... maybe we see dead people, people who are no longer alive in our dreams, and we're like, oh, you're still alive. Oh, okay, no problem. You know, like we're far less critical in our dreams, to the extent that as soon as we wake up, we recognize how strange our dreams actually were. Then again, as we'll see in a moment, quite a bit of importance was attributed to dreams in the ancient world. Dreams were often thought to be a source of inspiration or prophecy or divine messages or something like this, right? So I don't know. I don't know why dreams are difficult to remember, but Laberge's proposal is interesting to think about. It really gets you thinking about all the reasons why we might not want to remember our dreams versus why we might want to remember our dreams, or the reasons why we don't or why we do remember our dreams. So just a little food for thought, I suppose, there. So, speaking of ancient accounts of dreaming, I did mention just a moment ago, most ancient societies attributed a lot of importance to dreams. They believed that dreams were divine in origin. My favorite example of this is the ancient Greek view of dreams. So, in the ancient Greek pantheon, there's a god named Morpheus. Morpheus, the word Morpheus means shaper. Like shaper of form, like former, shaper. Now, he's the principal god of dreams, but each dream was also kind of like a god on its own, or a message from a god, and these were called oneiroi. This is the Greek word for dreams. The oneiroi presided over various aspects of dreaming, and Morpheus was kind of the principal god of dreaming. So, the ancient Greeks attached kind of divine importance, but in a sort of animistic way, right? The Greeks were polytheists, but they were also kind of animists, as I talked about in my lectures on the uncanny. So, of course, ancient Greece is not the only example of a culture that assigned a lot of importance to dreams. I can't go through a big exhaustive list, but a couple other noteworthy examples of this kind of thing are the creation myths of Australian Aboriginal people. Many of them, in their oral traditions, say that the universe was dreamed into existence, which is really cool. In a lot of other ancient myths, the universe is spoken into existence. Or sometimes it's made out of something, made out of another being. But in the Judeo-Christian Islamic mythos, for example, the universe, the world, is spoken into existence, right? God says, let there be light, and there was light, and it was good, and all of that, right? But here, it was dreamed into existence. I find that really cool. Of course, getting back to the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, you know, we even find dreams are important in the Bible. For example, the prophet Daniel is associated with interpreting dreams. He famously in the book of Daniel in the Old Testament interprets the dreams of the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II. So that's really cool. You can go and read about that. But in any case, I can't go through an exhaustive account of this stuff, but dreams have been important. Messages, there are good ones and bad ones. This is something that's been recognized as well in many different cultures. I'm just thinking here of like the dream catchers of Aboriginal North American culture, which are trying to catch the bad dreams and let the good dreams through, right? So this is what a dream catcher is supposed to do. Of course, prophetic or divine significance aside, dreams have also been credited with being inspirational as well. So some scientists have drawn inspiration from dreams. Most famous example is a German chemist, Kekulé, who dreamt of an Ouroboros, or a snake devouring its own tail. And this dream, he claimed, led him to the discovery of the structure of the benzene molecule, which is this kind of hydrocarbon hexagon kind of thing, right? I'm not a chemist, so I better not say too much about benzene or Kekulé's discoveries. But he did credit this to a dream that he had, which is pretty cool. So maybe dreams help us to be creative and imaginative in some way. I suppose the first really significant modern account of dreams is probably that of Sigmund Freud. Now, of course, Freud offered a psychoanalytic explanation of dreams, and all of these ideas we find in one of his most popular works, The Interpretation of Dreams, which was published in 1899. Now, Freud thinks of dreams in terms of wish fulfillment. So he kind of thinks there's like two processes at work here. There's the unconscious generation of a wish, and it's fulfilled in the dream, but it's also kind of censored to conceal the fulfillment of the wish. So perhaps your dream is really about sex if you're dreaming about traveling through a tunnel, or, you know, you see these montages of trains going through tunnels and fireworks going off on certain television shows that are meant to signify that that a couple of characters are getting their freak on. Your dreams are kind of like this for Freud. But then again, Freud himself said, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. So dreams may also express, repressed fears, desires, traumatic events. And the interpretation of dreams is an important part of psychoanalysis for Freud. Because of this unconscious wish generation fulfillment, but disguising of the fulfillment, you have to do psychoanalysis to understand the dreams, and you have to interpret your dreams the right way. So a lot of Freud's really well-known ideas actually come from this book, like the Oedipus Complex, for example. So I won't spend too much time talking about that, but that's just interesting. Freud was probably the first guy to try and understand dreams scientifically. At least he thought that's what he was doing. Nowadays, and I want to be clear about this, Freud's account of dreams is not really taken seriously by sleep and dream researchers. But he was the first guy to, I suppose, try and tackle it this way. So I think he's owed some credit for doing that. And his ideas, even if they're wrong, are quite interesting and fun to read about anyway. So what about a more scientific account of dreams? Well, let's talk about a couple examples of more scientifically rigorous accounts of dreams than Freud's now. So on Blackmore's chapter on dreams, we read that some theorists, like Flanagan, think that dreams are evolutionary epiphenomena. What is an epiphenomenon? An epiphenomenon is something that doesn't really play a causal role at all. It's just kind of there. Some thinkers argue that consciousness itself is epiphenomenal, which is to say that my conscious intention to pick up this coffee cup and take a sip from it, for example, has nothing to do with my actual reaching out and picking up of the coffee cup. It's just some kind of post hoc narrative that my brain makes up for me to make me think that I have free will and everything, right? But, so that's an epiphenomenon. So if dreams are evolutionary epiphenomena, they may, to quote Flanagan, just come along as a free rider on a system designed to think and to sleep. So dreams are just something that our brains are able to do and do, but it doesn't really have a purpose. It's just kind of something that's come about for some reason, and perhaps is a byproduct of our brain's ability to do other things, like to have mental imagery, to imagine, to think, so on and so forth. Dreams for Flanagan, by the way, are a little different than your usual epiphenomena. Flanagan does think that dreams can have effects. So I might have a nightmare and wake up and maybe I don't remember the nightmare, but my mood might be colored for the rest of the day. Perhaps I'll be more anxious than usual because of my nightmare. So it can kind of set the emotional tone for the day. So dreams can have an effect, but they don't have an evolutionary function. And that's what Flanagan means by saying that they're evolutionary epiphenomena. Other thinkers, like Hobson, think dreams are epiphenomena as well, pointing out, for example, that most people, as we've already discussed, don't remember their dreams, and they do just fine having not remembered their dreams, so they're probably epiphenomenal. Other thinkers think that dreams do have a purpose, however. So, for example, Revonsuo's threat simulation theory posits that dreams evolved to simulate threats and to practice dealing with them. Think perhaps of our imaginary cat who was dreaming of the dog who had run away before, right? So, Revonsuo points out that modern dreams include more threatening events than people typically encounter in their waking lives, right? And a similar idea, this idea of dreaming as a kind of play, is endorsed by Humphrey as well. Humphrey actually writes in a 1983 publication, quote, "Dreaming represents the most audacious and ingenious of nature's tricks for educating her psychologists." So, dreams here are almost like an offline form of play, where play is for learning. Play serves a role. Like, I'm thinking here of like animal play. You know, think of kittens, to keep the running example of cats. Kittens who play with one another, they kind of bat each other with their paws and wrestle and try to sneak up and jump on one another. This is playful and it's very cute, but it's also that cats can learn to hunt when they're adults, right? Dreams might be kind of an offline form of play. Offline in the sense that they're, they're not being generated by sensory information coming from the environment, but only from what's in the mind. But in any case, this is a really interesting idea. And Hobson thinks similarly that dreams may support memory consolidation as well. And notice, all of these kind of suggest that dreams are for learning how to deal with perhaps new social, physical, or intellectual challenges, right? Whether it's consolidating our memories of tackling those things in the past so that we do better at similar sorts of challenges in the future, or whether dreaming is a kind of like mental play that happens at night. They all seem to suggest that dreams are important for supporting, for being adaptive. Being able to adapt and deal with these new situations. Now, we don't need to remember our dreams for any of this to actually work, which is the interesting part. All of this could be done unconsciously, and it's still conceivable to me that the memories that are consolidated, or the simulations that are simulated, or whatever, may still feature in our behavior, may still impact our behavior and make an observable difference in our behavior, even if we don't consciously remember them. And I don't have time to get into the super detailed reasons why I believe that, but if any of you are curious, let me know in the comments section and I'll let you know what I think. All right. Going back to Stephen Laberge for a bit, whose work we're going to talk about a little more now. He's put forward a theory of not why we dream, but how dreams come to be, how dreams work. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit now. All right, so recall, if you will, what I said a little while ago about the dreaming brain being nearly as active during REM sleep as it is when we are awake. And according to Stephen Laberge, that's because the dreaming brain is doing what the waking brain is doing. It is representing the world, the environment, and you within the environment. So, where does the brain get what it needs to do this, to make this representation of the world and of you, if your brain is not connected up to the world? I mean, it kind of is. Like, if there's a loud enough noise, it will wake you up, or sometimes certain noises might be incorporated into your dreams. But by and large, there's not a lot of information coming in. But by and large, there's not a lot of information coming in from your sensory systems. So, what's going on? Well, when we're awake, we can generate an experience of the world, as it were, by using information from the senses. But when we're dreaming, this information is coming from an internal source, not an external source. So Laberge is actually proposing that the brain is drawing upon memories and emotions, expectations, motivations, and so on and so forth to generate experiences during REM sleep. So, for example, dream stuff, the dreams, whatever dreams turn out to be, are a matter of this kind of interaction or association between active and inactive schemas. A schema is kind of what a psychologist would call a concept. A philosopher or a cognitive scientist would call these concepts. They are mental items, right, used for thinking. And there are lots of different views about what concepts actually are, which we don't have time to get into. But this might explain why dreams are so weird and unstable, right? When we're awake, we have a stable representation of the world because the world is stable, right? When we're dreaming, the same cannot be said. So when I'm awake, you know, I can reach over to my lamp and I can turn it off and on somewhat reliably, right? It's hooked up to a power source that's delivering power, and it seems to be working. Great. But if I were dreaming, this lamp might malfunction because there is no lamp. There is no power source. It's just memory and expectation that's making the lamp work the way it does. Likewise with reading text. If I read, for example, Tim Hortons on my somewhat underwhelming coffee here, and I look away, and then I look back, it still says Tim Hortons. Why is that? Well, that's because in the real world, there's actually a coffee cup here that says this, and this is stable. It's not changing. So my representation of it is the same when I look for the first time and look away and look back. Or consider another example. Ibanez. Okay, look away, look back. Ah, look, it hasn't changed. Why? Well, because there's actually a guitar sitting here, right? My experience is generating, or is being generated, and it's stable on the basis of the fact that the world is stable. But when we're dreaming, this is not the case. And that's why, if I was dreaming, this might say something else. This might say something else. For the same reason, digital clocks and watches are very difficult to read in dreams, because there's no stable object that the representation is based upon. Moreover, areas of the prefrontal cortex are decreased in activity during dreams, which is why we seem to be oblivious to so many of these strange occurrences in dreams, because the prefrontal cortex is important when it comes to critical thinking and whatnot, and evaluating things critically. So it's less active in dreams, and we seem to be much less critical in dreams. So that might explain why dreams are so strange and weird, if they're being generated in this way that Laberge suggests. So here, you know, perhaps I might have had something strange happen to me in the that day. Perhaps I saw perhaps I saw something particularly peculiar, like a unicyclist parade. And then later that night, I dreamt of a similar parade, but with far more unicyclists. And as the parade goes on, other floats and things start showing up that perhaps in my mind I have associated with parades. So maybe like some elephants walk by in this parade, perhaps a marching band, perhaps a float containing some interesting characters, right? All of which don't really have anything directly to do with what I saw that day, but just because of the association between the unicycle parade I saw, the unicycle parade I initially dreamed of, and my expectations and memories of parades in general, I start seeing all kinds of weird stuff in my dream parade. It might turn maybe some kind of mishmash between a Santa Claus parade and a pride parade and a circus and a marching band, or, you know, and I would not think anything of it when I'm dreaming. Like, wow, great parade. They have the unicycles, there's Santa Claus, and here come the drag queens. What a great parade, you know? Like, that kind of thing. One theory of dreaming that's pretty different from everything we've discussed so far is Daniel Dennett's account of dreaming, which has come to be known as the cassette theory of dreaming. Now, Daniel Dennett is a philosopher of mind who's made some very interesting contributions to cognitive science and the study of consciousness. I like Dennett's ideas, but this is a very interesting one. The idea here is that dreams are actually a result of what we could think of as instantaneous memory insertions that occur when we wake up. Almost as if we don't have a dream and then wake up and remember it. What we do is simply remember a dream when we wake up, and we don't really have a dream in the sense that we usually mean. Instead, the memory of having had the dream is popped in, a bit like a cassette is popped into a tape deck, if you remember cassette tapes. So there are two processes at work here that Dennett thinks is generating our dreams. We have a composition process that occurs during REM sleep that develops the dream narrative. But this is actually unconscious. We're not actually having a dream. It's just an unconscious composition process. The other is this sort of cassette function, this memory insertion process, which underlies one's recollection of a dream. So what we remember as an experience is actually inserted like a cassette tape, and playing the cassette tape is like remembering the dream. I'm paraphrasing the quote from Dennett that we find in Blackmore's chapter, but he says something to the effect of, there is nothing that it's like to dream, meaning that dreams are not experiences, but there is something that it's like to have had a dream. Very interesting idea. It's kind of a difference that makes no difference. This is how Blackmore understands it anyway. Whether we really do dream and then recall the dream upon awakening, or whether the dream is a result of an instantaneous memory insertion, doesn't seem to make a difference. There isn't a way we can see what's right or wrong here. At least Blackmore doesn't seem to consider this option that I'm about to consider here, but it seems to me that dreams occur in real time. What Dennett proposes would involve that this is kind of a trick of the mind. Our dreams are not really experiences that we've had, they're just memories that are inserted upon awakening. But I think we can actually explore this experimentally, and Blackmore does mention this possibility in another of her books, Conversations on Consciousness, where she interviews both Stephen Laberge and Daniel Dennett, and asks Daniel Dennett and Laberge about dreams. But perhaps we can clarify this by discussing a particular kind of dream called a lucid dream. And this is the really interesting part of this lecture, I think. So here we go. So a lucid dream is a dream one has during which one realizes that she or he is dreaming. So it's a dream where you know it's a dream. I'm sure many of you have had these before. They've been recorded since antiquity, so people have ostensibly been having them. for a long time, probably as long as they've been dreaming and as long as we've known the difference between dreaming and waking. But for a long time, scientists and philosophers thought that a lucid dream was a contradiction in terms. A lucid dream was coined fairly recently in the early 20th century by a Dutch psychiatrist or psychologist, a Dutch thinker named Frederik van Eden. He coined the term lucid dream, but of course lucid dreams have been going on a lot longer than the early 20th century. But a lot of people were skeptical of them for a long time. They thought it was like a contradiction in terms. When we're asleep, we're unconscious. How could we be aware or conscious or lucid while we're unconscious? Doesn't make sense. Lucid dreams must be something else. We're probably mistaken about them, or perhaps they're daydreams, whatever. But there's some explanation. They can't really be dreams. It doesn't make any sense. So the conventional wisdom went. Now, of course, people have reported having dreams in which they were aware they were dreaming for many, many, many years. But it wasn't until the late 70s, early 80s, that it was actually shown that lucid dreams were real. And this was done by two researchers independently of one another at around the same time, which is really cool. Not often does this happen in science, but when it does, it's really good. It's really neat. Anyway, parapsychologist Keith Hearn was working in the United Kingdom with an experimental participant called Alan Worsley. He was a skilled lucid dreamer who would come to the sleep lab. And Stephen Laberge, working in the United States, was a psychophysiologist who studies the mind-body relationship. And he was working at Stanford University, developing techniques that he and his fellow researchers could use to induce lucid dreams to study them in the sleep lab. Now, each of them called these people, well, they each of them used these people that Laberge calls onironauts, explorers of the dream world. So people who were skilled at inducing lucid dreams on their own. And both Laberge and Hearn, working independently of one another, realized that they could use these eye movements that, well, give REM sleep its name, rapid eye movements, to study lucid dreams. That's because, as I mentioned earlier, the eye movements that we observe in, on an EOG, an electrooculogram of eyes darting back and forth between underneath closed eyelids, are actually saccading around the dreamscape and tracking things, doing the smooth pursuit of things in the dream state. They're not really random eye movements. So, this was actually discovered by chance when someone in a sleep lab, their eye movements were kind of like regular, non-random left to right for extended periods of time. And the researchers woke this person up from their dream and said, what on earth were you just dreaming about? And he said, I was watching a ping pong match. And he was watching, in his dream, the ping pong ball being volleyed, across the table, back and forth, following it like this with his dream gaze. So Hearn and Laberge each realized that they could use this to have their onironauts signal from within the dream when they realized they were dreaming and when they carried out certain experimental tasks within the dream. This is just so cool. I mean, nobody thought this could have been done before. Nobody thought this would have even been possible. But Laberge and Hearn both managed to have their onironauts make predetermined signals from the dream state to indicate to the experimenters what they were doing in the dream. And this could be recorded with the electrooculograph in the sleep lab, which tracks your eye movements. So very, very cool. And Laberge in particular has used this method to study the mind-body relationship during sleep and during waking life. One of the things he's talked about is the subjective passage of time in dreams, which is important for our discussion of Dennett's idea of dreams, his cassette theory. The reason for that is because it seems that in dreams, time passes subjectively the same way it passes in waking life. That is to say, if you ask me to count 10 seconds, and I'll count silently, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, I'll get there in about 10 seconds when I'm awake. Same when I dream, you know, I signal maybe that I realize it's a dream in the sleep lab, so I have a signal for that, so I signal the sleep scientist, and then I'll signal that I've begun counting, and then I signal when I've stopped counting. And again, the length of time it takes a dreamer to do that in a lucid dream is about the same length of time it would take me to do it while I'm awake. So that's really cool. This to me seems to suggest that maybe Dennett's theory is off the mark, because these kinds of experiments seem to suggest that dreams are experiences that are taking place in real time. They're a different sort of experience than waking experience, but it doesn't seem that they're composed and then inserted upon awakening. If an oneironaut is able to enter a dream having established the pattern of eye movements they're going to make and under what circumstances they're going to make them, it just seems like Dennett's theory doesn't quite capture this. So that's really interesting. Now, of course, lucid dreams are just really cool. So irrespective of whether you think dreams are supernatural or divine or mysterious or scientifically explainable, it's still really cool to have lucid dreams. It's just a really neat, I guess we could think of them as an altered state of consciousness. Blackmore seems to argue as much in this chapter, but an altered state of consciousness that does not require us to put any kind of chemicals into our brains. So a nice, healthy, non-harmful kind of altered state that everyone can learn to have. What you want to do is improve your dream recall, perhaps by keeping a journal of your dreams. And you need to learn to identify what is dream-like about them, and then begin to question your state. This is sometimes called reality testing or critical state testing. And you want to do this whenever you see something dream-like in waking life. So it could be something you dreamed about. Perhaps I often dream about the guitar, playing the guitar, right? So maybe every time I see a guitar or hear some music with a guitar, I should ask myself if I'm dreaming. And I can check by doing something similar to what I did before with the light, seeing if the light switches work, or trying to read some text, and then looking away and seeing if the text has changed. Lots of ways to do this. You can read about all of this on the internet, by the way. Just be careful of all the dream flim-flam that's out there. There's a lot of flim-flam and humbuggery surrounding dreams, non-scientific stuff. So, you know, watch out for that stuff. But you can also use specific techniques like mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, which was developed by Stephen Laberge when he was doing his PhD thesis at Stanford. And this is basically a way of waking yourself up and kind of like rehearsing the dream scene that you've just woken up from, only you do it and you rehearse it in a way where you realize you're dreaming, and then hopefully when you fall asleep shortly after, you'll do the same thing in a dream and realize you're dreaming. Anyway, like I said, there's tons of info about this on the internet where you can learn how to have a lucid dream if you want to. And if you're interested in consciousness or dreams or anything like that, I encourage you to do so. It is a very cool way to explore the mind, to have a lucid dream. All right? So, well, I guess I should wrap it up, and I just want to say a few brief things about out-of-body experiences, as well as the connection I'm trying to draw here between out-of-body experiences and lucid dreams and the paranormal. So why don't I try and wrap all of this up in a few minutes. So just to try to connect all of this together real quick, and to bring in out-of-body experience as well. Out-of-body experiences are these experiences we have when we feel as though our mind, our consciousness, has left the physical body. Sometimes you get these with like in reported near-death experiences. Sometimes you get them rarely in cases of peak performance. People talk about it's almost like they're watching themselves play a piece of music or score a goal or something, almost like they're not in their body. But many, many, many out-of-body experiences occur when we're waking up or falling asleep. So according to Levitin and Laberge, most out-of-body experiences are probably a type of dream. Probably a type of dream that's related to what we could call a false awakening. A false awakening is when you dreamt you've woken up. And they can be very strange. You might wake up and start going about your day, and then something horrible happens, and then you really wake up surprised that you were actually just having a nightmare when you were believed you were awake. So they may be related to these things, and also related to sleep paralysis, which is the paralysis that occurs when we're in REM sleep, so that we don't act out our dreams. In cases of sleep paralysis, what happens is we tend to remain kind of paralyzed and kind of half in REM sleep and half awake, so that we might feel as though we're awake and we dream about leaving our body, when really what has happened is that we've slipped back into a dream and dreamt that our mind has left our body. Sleep paralysis, by the way, may be related to other weird paranormal, supernatural stuff. We used to get in Europe reports of the incubi and succubi. These are demons that were believed to come and take advantage of people sexually as they slept. So the succubus was a female demon that would accost male sleepers, and the incubus was a male demon that would accost female sleepers. Of course, these are probably just cases of sleep paralysis, which can be quite frightening if you don't know what's going on, because you seem to be awake and yet you can't move. And if you're hallucinating, or you slip back into a dream and start dreaming of ghosts or demons or whatnot, that must be quite frightening. This may even, just to relate it back to the other lecture of the week, may even help to explain some reports of alien abductions. Many reports of alien abductions go something like this, where the abductee was asleep, or claimed to have just been awoken from a sleep, or was drifting back to sleep when, you know, the aliens came. This is probably a result of sleep paralysis or some kind of dream, right? At least in these cases, we can explain them. Explain it this way. In other cases, like the Hill abduction case, which is mentioned in the Carl Sagan documentary I had you watch, the memories of that abduction were actually recalled with the help of hypnosis months after the purported abduction. In those cases, we have worries about false memory and memory insertion. But when it comes to cases of purported alien abduction when people are asleep in bed, I think it's probably best explained by sleep paralysis. Now, I realize I'm not going into this in any great detail. It may make a good special topic. Who knows? Maybe one of you would like to suggest it. Talking about how sleep paralysis might explain encounters with demons or abductions by aliens and so on and so forth. But the point is that these are all phenomena that were thought to have paranormal or supernatural causes that we can now explain naturalistically. Likewise with lucid dreams. It was once thought that such things must have been impossible, but they were shown to be genuine phenomena, real phenomena, using the tools of science. And the funny thing is, when that happened, lucid dreams started to go from the parapsychological just to the psychological. So that's a funny how it goes. When parapsychology actually identifies something, it's not parapsychology anymore. It just starts to get studied by regular scientists. So there's some food for thought for your critical response if you decide to write a critical response on this topic. Well, I suppose I'd better wrap it up for the day. I'm quite busy trying to catch up. Speaking of that, the next lecture, the first lecture for week 5, I'm going to try to get that done as soon as possible. But what I might do is actually I'll do the essay writing lecture first so that you can start thinking about how you're going to write your final paper. And then in the meantime, I can prepare our next lecture on anomalistic psychology while I get caught up with grading your critical responses. I apologize, by the way, that I don't have your second critical responses graded yet. I'm going to get this done as soon as I can. I'm just juggling a lot of work right now. I've taken on perhaps more teaching responsibilities than is advisable, but it was kind of an emergency situation. So I will not penalize anybody. I'll be very accommodating for any of you if you need any extra time with anything, because I need extra time to get my things done too. And I'm not going to, I know that's unfair to you, so I'm not going to be extra unfair, and I'll try and be as accommodating as I can for the rest of the class. Remember also, your essay topic proposals as well as your special topic suggestions are due on the 31st of the month. There's already a place where you can submit your special topics proposal. I will create a place where you can submit your essay proposal. And again, the idea here is just so that I can give you some feedback before you really get started with writing your essay. So that is all for today. I will see you next time when I will talk about, well, I guess now, next time I'm not going to do anomalistic psychology. I'll talk about how to write a really good essay. And then we'll talk about anomalistic psychology. But in any case, I'll see you all next time. All right, bye for now, everybody.